Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this fifth meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee on Comprehensive Job Creation Plan. Today is Wednesday, February 10th. I'm Paul Krikori, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Council Members Blumenfield and Price, and we're ready to begin. We're going to take public comment first, and as of this moment, the only comment cards that I have on our three agenda items are from Patricia McAllister. So Ms. McAllister, I'd like to invite you to come up, and I'm going to give you a block of 5 minutes to speak on all of your items, however you would like to divide them up.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Pleasure.
I'm Patricia McAllister. This is a very important meeting to me. I'm a former business owner. I owned Computer Consulting Unlimited for 12 years in Chicago, made over $1 million in my 12 years in business, and I'm very proud of that. I'm a computer scientist, so I taught people how to write software. My degree is from Chicago State University in computer science with 30 hours of math. Now, this is what I did in Chicago with the Chicago contracts, because I was in business, so I wanted to make sure my business was minority and women owned, that I got contracts with the city. And I also started a business where I would look out for all African American women to make sure that they got contracts. Now, we had a category, and I see your categories here, MBE, WBE. Well, I was in both categories, minority business and women business. But we had a big problem. Within that minority, they had women, white women, Asian women, Hispanic women, all women. And under the MBE, they were also classified as minority. So that knocked out all the blacks. We may have gotten 5% of the contracts when white women who were fronting for white men business owners were getting 95% of the contracts. So I know the game. Now, the reason we have a lot of homelessness of blacks here, I think there are 50,000 homeless. Those are just the ones they could get off the street. We're not talking about the ones living with mom and pa and relatives. Say 50,000, 40,000 are black. Now, let's work from the top down. There's a reason why they're homeless. They're homeless because they don't have jobs. That's what it is. They're being discriminated against. And the ones who want to start business, I looked at your requirements here to even be classified. And I was classified as all of these. I had all of my stuff. But most people don't, especially the poor people. They can't qualify for being an MBE and a WBE. So I say we need a separate category called black business ownerships. And there won't be any fronts, and they have to be black. That's what we need, because it's so critical right now. Blacks are in such bad shape that we need a category for them. We know they don't have the funds, so we're going to give them the funds. We're not loaning them anything. And they will be monitored. If they don't follow the guidelines, they have to come out and we put some more in there. But we've got to start this chain so that they can climb themselves up from the bottom. Now, local businesses, we know they don't have the businesses in the community. We know what happened. The illegals came here and they had these turf wars in LA. I'm from Chicago, but I used to keep up with what's going on here. Turf wars. They were wars about communities and the women and who was going to be in control, and the Hispanics and the illegals won. Most of the blacks who weren't killed, they moved out of the communities. So we need them back in those communities. We want them, the ones who are still there, to start their own businesses. We want to fund them, monitor them, and make sure they grow. Now, we have a small community that I go to when I first came to LA. It's called Leimert Park. When I came here, I wanted to know where the black community was, because I'm from a black community. And they said, we don't have one. We only have one, Leimert Park. So that's where I've been going for the last 12 years. And they have a Sunday, it's like a community where they come out and sell their wares. And I see the city trying to push the Sunday group out. I go there every Sunday just about, sitting by my shea butter and everything else I want. So I think we need to keep that. Now, if they get pushed off, we're going on Alvarado and Wilshire all up and down there and push out all those illegals. Now, like I said, I get around. I was there once when the police came and told me, get away, get out, get out. They packed up for an hour and went back, and cops never said a word. So I know the game. They've taken over. So we're going to move the Leimert Park out, those people. And I like those people. They're very nice. Then we're going to move out. We're going to get all these illegal stands out of Los Angeles. So we're going to be fair about it. But I'm for black people. You want to keep them on Alvarado, fine with me. But I say we put a separate category and somebody we can trust to monitor it. It's called the BBE, Black Business Enterprise. And I could give you something, write it up for you and show you how to do it and all of that. Like I said, I'm a business owner and a computer scientist. I'm into black people. I'm not ashamed to be black. A lot of black people, you know, I'm from the Obla homes in Chicago, and I understand they redid that and it's still there. All my teachers were African American. They all lived in the community, and they all went to the church. I used to go to church and sit next to my teachers until integration came in, and then they all moved out and went to the white folks community. But I'm proud to be a product of black people, and I'm not ashamed to be black. And we have to help black people because it hurts me when I see them on the street like this. So let's start a new category, because right now the way it's set up, all the people who are going to get are white, the Asians, and they said the Asian is the largest population of illegals, one of the largest. Hispanics. In this program, those are the ones who are going to get the money and the contracts, and of course the white folks. I know white folks are disappearing from the planet, and the plan is to kill off as many blacks as they can. Census Bureau reported in 2012 more whites died than were born.
All right. Thank you very much. So are there any other cards on items 1, 2, or 3? All right. Then public comment on those items is closed. Are there any other general public comment cards? So general public comment is now closed as well. All right. That brings us to item number 1.
Item number 1 is the Chief Legislative Analyst to report in response to motion by Krikorian Buscaino relative to a review of the Local Business Preference Program and recommendations for changes to more effectively target local businesses and ensure cost-effectiveness of the program. On August 25th, the Economic Development Committee continued this item. That's August 25th of 2015. And it was also referred to Budget and Finance Committee.
Good afternoon. Members, you should have a written report from the CLA on this item. It came pretty late, so the members have not had an opportunity to actually consider this or evaluate it. So I'd like to ask you to give a more thorough than usual review of your report, and then we'll proceed with questions from there. And then, again, just friendly reminder that our engagement with staff is facilitated a great deal if all the members have an opportunity to review these reports well in advance of the hearing. We only have these hearings about every month or so, so it's important to get our reports done on a timely basis. So,
Second that. Third that.
Go right ahead.
Apologize for that. This is Gabriel Salazar with the CLA office. Yes, this report is in response to motion Krikorian Buscaino regarding the evaluation of the Local Business Preference Program. The motion was introduced in 2014, late 2014, and basically, and then previously discussed on January 27th and August 25th of 2015. There, the committee gave staff further instruction relative to the instructions of the motion. If you recall, the motion instructs the CLA to study the rate of participation along with other relevant departments, to study the rate of participation in the Local Business Preference Program, its effectiveness at keeping dollars local, any impacts that the program may have on the cost of procurement, and for the CLA to make any recommendations to more effectively target local businesses and ensure cost effectiveness of the program. Now, the Local Business Preference Program is a program created in 2010 through an ordinance, the Local Business Preference Policy Ordinance, and initiated in 2011 and finally started towards the end of fiscal year 2011-2012. And the Local Business Preference Program provides an 8% preference to local businesses, an 8% preference on local businesses on contracts greater than $150,000. And that's for equipment, supplies, personal services, and construction, those types of projects. So that's the general basis of the Local Business Preference Program. And so what our office did is we worked with the Bureau of Contract Administration, consulted with the Office of Finance, City Attorney, to respond to the motion and any instructions given by committee previously. And what we found out is that with we had 37 departments that we sent out requests twice last year in 2015 in coordination with BCA, and we received complete responses from 26 of the 27 departments.
And I want to stop you there for a moment, just so you don't think that I'm picking on you, because so you sent BCA sent these requests out to the departments when?
It was in February of 2015 and also in August of 2015.
Okay. I can't understand how in any government body it's acceptable for 1/3 of the departments that are requested to give reports back just don't respond to that request when it's done at the behest of the City Council of Los Angeles. And I have to tell you, when I read that, and I read that 1/3 of the departments just blew off BCA when we wanted these reports back, I was livid. And I continue to be. And I just don't understand how after 2 requests, general managers of any departments can just disregard those requests. And so I want to make it clear to any general managers that are listening, respond to the requests for reports when the City Council asks for it. When BCA asks for these reports, for a CLA report, I expect a response. And so I'm going to ask Ms. Hovasapien to work with you, get the list of the departments that failed after 2 requests to respond, and I want to respond in 7 days from today. I want that response. So get that list. I want a letter out over my signature, and I want that response back right now. So anyway, sorry. Go right ahead.
Thank you. So 26 of the 37 departments did provide complete information. And granted that these departments, this was the first time that we made this request to the city departments for them to provide this information. So it's maybe kind of just taking a stab, maybe like 60-70% accurate. So once we get more data, we could also make a better evaluation of the program. But anyways, with the data that we did receive, we saw that the range of local business enterprise participation ranged between 16 and 34% of businesses, and that amounted to about $1.1 million in contracts. But sorry, let me just take a step back. Local business enterprises, basically there's this local business preference program, and businesses to qualify for that local business preference program, there's 3 criteria that businesses in the county must meet. One, they must be located in the county and have 50 full-time employees or 60% of the regular work that's conducted here in the county. Or 2, demonstrate at least that half of the full-time employees perform 60% of the work here in the county. Or 3, they must have headquarters in the county. So provided that businesses meet those 3 criteria, any of the 3, they're eligible for this local business enterprise. So it's beneficial to businesses in the county, not Los Angeles specifically. Just wanted to clarify.
Sorry, yeah, I just wanted to clarify on that point too. So that what you just described is the definition provided in the local business preference ordinance. Are there any other definitions of local business enterprises that the city uses that differ from that? So, and here's where I'm going with this. The good news of this report is that there's a pretty substantial percentage of our contracting which is now going to local businesses, and that seems to be an improvement over where we were 5 years ago, and that's good. So when you're quantifying what percentage of contracts are going to LBEs, are you using the local business preference program definition
Yes.
to define those LBEs?
Yes.
Okay. So the takeaway that I get from this is pretty significant percentage are going to local businesses, but not as a result of the preference that they get in the local business preference program.
Yes,
Is that
true.
fair to say? I mean, there's a few, and they were very cost effective. We got, millions of dollars of economic activity that we kept in Los Angeles at the cost of tens of thousands of dollars. So that was pretty cost effective, but it was only on a handful of contracts. And I'm assuming that the reason for that is that the definition of local business is inclusive enough so that we didn't often have a situation where there was a completely outside business competing against a local business where the preference would kick in. Is that
That's a fair assessment.
reasonable takeaway from this?
Yes, that's a fair assessment.
So that the large percentage of local businesses that we had that are participating were mostly competing against other local businesses, and that's why they didn't. So that the 8% advantage didn't figure in because they were all getting it.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's good news on one hand, because we are preserving a lot of that economic activity locally. That was the goal. But it does suggest that maybe there are ways that we can maybe reshape the focus of the local business preference in order to more sharply delineate businesses that are the real that the council actually intended to most benefit. And I guess we'll come back to that when we get to your recommendations. But so sorry, go right ahead.
And then, so as you were saying, so like regarding those numbers, we did see that a quarter or 25% of the contracts were going to local business enterprises. And if you look at the complete program, in terms of businesses that benefit from the program, like you said, there's only a handful, so there's only actually 3 that benefited to the preference. And the cost and how we measure that, basically, if you have a business that's an LBE that meets the criteria and submits a RFB for, let's say, fleet trucks of $200,000, and then you have a business outside the county but submits a bid for $196,000, the local business enterprise based in the evaluation would get reduced by 8%, and more often than not, they would get that contract because then their bid amount would be, it would still be paid the full price of $200,000, but it would be evaluated based on the 8% reduction. So with that being said, like I said, only 3 businesses specifically benefited from the preference, and like Mr. Councilmember Krikorian said, overall we are seeing a decent participation, where it's 25% of the overall program. And the cost to the city in terms of paying that $200,000 versus the $195,000, if we look at it cumulatively, it was only $39,000. And again, that's based on the data that we received.
And the total value of those contracts was
$5.2 million.
So
There were three contracts?
Yes, 3 contracts.
So $5 million of economic activity that stays local capture of tax benefits and everything else at a cost of $35,000. That's a good return on investment. But
When you said we had 25 is a good percentage for local business, what is that based on? I mean, it sounds low to me. But I haven't benchmarked it. Like, how does that compare to New York or Chicago or other cities?
Honestly, we didn't look into that, like in comparison to other cities. But one of our recommendations, in terms of long-term recommendations, is to kind of look at best practices in small business programming in general. So that's definitely one of the areas that we can look at and maybe compare the LBP to other local business programs in the country.
So there's a general sense that that's like you were saying, it's a decent number. I just have no idea. I looked at it as a low number. But
Yeah. Well, I thought it was lower. I thought it was like 2 or 3%. Where did we get that number from?
The 2 or 3%, yeah.
My understanding was that the local business percentage was about 2 or 3% versus the total procurement, $1 billion, $4 billion budget, procurement budget, or whatever the number is. Where did I get that number from, as opposed to this 25 that you're?
So there was the total amount of contracts here. There was 2,043 contracts. So we had 3 of those 2,043 contracts. 3 of those went to local business enterprises, and that's where local business private enterprises due to the preference. So when you look at it holistically, or big picture, like as a whole, then it is 2043. When you compare it to local business enterprises, that's when you get the 25% of the whole program in general.
Councilman, at the back of the report, there's a chart that shows year to year. And one of the things we're seeing is that the number of local businesses receiving contracts and bids is actually growing from year to year. So 25% is the 4-year average, but we're actually at 33% in 14-15 based on the data that we received. So something's happening to help improve that rate. But your point is right. Is 33% an effective number? Should that be a higher number? Or are we doing great because we're at 33% and we don't have data to show that?
Is it an apples-to-apples comparison when you look at this year where you only have 26 out of 37 departments, and the previous years, are they the same 26 out of 37 departments that are being compared?
Yes. Basically, this was information from the departments provided for the last 4.5 fiscal years.
And I need to interject that thank you, because since this program began, we've never had this data reported back to us. And so this is really the first time that we're getting this information, this evaluative information. And even when we enacted the ordinance initially, just to find out how much we were actually spending in procurement was, people shrugged their shoulders and said, well, it depends. Depends on how you define it and so on. So we didn't really have good figures then, but what we did have, the estimates that we had, were well below this. People were talking about, 85, 90% of our procurement money being spent outside of Los Angeles.
So good progress, but we don't necessarily know benchmark comparison.
Yeah.
One other follow-up on just the numbers and how we get them. With the open data portal and the controllers, you can go now online and see every city contract. Why, or is this available? Is this information marked on the open data portal? Why not? If not, and wouldn't that automatically give us the information for all departments and all information? Why do we need to rely on the departments telling us if every single contract is online and available?
Okay. A couple things. The data obtained here is to the department's self-reporting to BCA, so in coordination with them. Something to talk about is the business assistance virtual network, where departments to departments notify businesses of opportunities and contracts available for procurement. Just that BAVN mechanism is simply used to notify and inform businesses of opportunities, but a lot of departments don't, and we in the report don't report that data on BAVN. If they were to do that, that would provide more information, clear information that we could use, and that would kind of figure out what's going on exactly and how to. Then we get to the next step in terms of how to better target businesses, things like that. And then your second question regarding other departments and the controller, I did consult with the controller. We did check out the controller website, data portals on the mayor's office. There I would see listings of procurement, contracts, and they would list payments, but not necessarily if you want to break it down deeper in terms of business size or the type of businesses or multiple contracts for businesses or just contracts of businesses there. It wasn't clear. Like you would get that information that provided is on payments, so maybe checks that we make out to businesses, but and I would look procurement as well. But again, you would have information on departments and payments that they made, but not necessarily when you look at those digging deeper in terms of how many are located in the city or how many are LBEs. So we'd have to coordinate and work better with the office of the controller or the mayor's office or finance to get there.
These are data sets, I would argue, and maybe as part of our recommendation, that should be in that open data portal. That we should, whether we have a good record or a bad record, that should be a transparent record. And I don't think it's that much harder given that we already have, there is this issue of getting BAVN to talk to the open data, and we talked about that in IGTCT the other time, trying to get them to funding to get all three of their networks to talk to each other. So I get that, but that being said, there's no reason we couldn't have additional data sets on the open data portal and having to do with small business and
That's on item 2 coming up. We've done some of the preliminary research on that, and that's exactly the issue that we discovered is the data doesn't exactly exist in the database to answer a question of what's a small business or what's a local business. And so one of the recommendations I think that we've been talking about is making sure that the databases are structured in a way that captures that data so you can do the analysis.
And one of the recommendations on this item is going to be to set up a working group across departments to develop some comprehensive recommendations. I think how we get that information, capture it, and make it available in the open data universe is an important task for that working group. It's going to be more challenging than it sounds because it's dependent upon departmental reporting. The address that you send the check to doesn't define whether it's a local business, for example. So you have to look deeper than that, and that is very much going to depend on whether managers who are evaluating these things are actually reporting the correct information. For example, with the local business preference, even if you knew everything there was to know about the winning bidder, you still wouldn't know whether it won over a non-local business because you don't have any information about the losing bidders. So that's why this is kind of dependent upon the thoroughness of people's actual reporting. And that's, I think, an area that we need to work on in this working group to figure out how do we take it off of people's backs and use a technological solution to make sure that we're capturing that in a way that's not going to be so labor intensive. So we keep cutting you off in midstream, sorry. Why don't you just go ahead and move forward and kind of go over some of the recommendations, and we'll go from there.
So we recommended recommendations more short-term, intermediate, and administrative for the program, and those on recommendation number 1, where we called for requested better reporting and monitoring tracking of the level of participation by city departments, enhanced promotion and outreach for the local business preference program, just reporting, like I said, of contract award data on the BAVN system as well, and then also too that in that number 1, we requested or enhanced training by BCA for state departments, because a lot of departments have department contract coordinators. BCA is a designated administrative agency of this program, but that doesn't necessarily translate to the departments getting trained or implementing this program as well, or recording what's on there as well.
The outreach piece was important. We have how many? 400,000 businesses registered with our Office of Finance that are local businesses. They're working in the city. And at a minimum, letting them know that BAVN exists, know how to find bidding opportunities with the cities, with the City of Los Angeles, is a way to reach out and make sure that local businesses know that they can do business with us. And so that outreach piece is particularly important.
Great.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
First of all, thank you for your focus on this issue. I think it really is very important. Our ability to leverage our local procurement dollars can be a real important component in our economic development and in our strategy. I think it has to be. So I'm surprised, but not surprised, that we're just starting to track data. This kind of data, I guess it's been getting lip service all these years. But now we can focus on and determine exactly how we can do better, because I think that should be the goal, to increase that 25%, if that's the number, to something greater in terms of local involvement. But we have to have mandatory and better data and mandatory data from the departments, and we just need to get that, and we have to figure out some penalties if that's not received. And, when I try to start a new system of punishment, but I think this is important, and I think the more we say that, hopefully the more others will realize it. So I think being able to plug in with BAVN makes a lot of sense. We're already making an investment in that software. It does a lot already, and from what we're hearing, it can do a lot more. And this is exactly, Mr. Chairman, I think, an area where we could help to clarify, expand, and sort of buttress up BAVN and the unique role it has and plays in managing our procurement dollars here in the city. So I'm excited for the recommendations. Look forward to working with you on it.
Thank you. And before we move off of that first recommendation, and I guess the staffing resources and recommendation 2, and the coordination recommendation and recommendation 3, those 3 all kind of go hand in hand. The one thing that I want to make sure we do is make it easier and not more difficult for small businesses to participate. And also, while I want to make sure that we are not having local businesses qualify as local businesses that are in fact not local, I also don't want to put undue burden on small businesses to have to verify that and to be subject to independent audits and verifications, the kind of things that frustrate small businesses from wanting to do business with the city. So one of the things I'd like the working group to figure out is, how do we make this simpler? for businesses, how do we make it simpler for businesses to participate in procurement, to be entitled to consideration under the local business preference and others, but not have this program be so onerous that nobody wants to do business with us. And it's long been a challenge, but I think that needs to be one of the guiding principles that goes into the work of the working group. And particularly, Ms. McAllister was talking earlier, and I think this is frequently a concern when you have a big national business that creates some small business in order to compete against the real mom and pops in our city, and we're subject to the same vulnerability with women-owned and minority-owned businesses and others. And I want to make sure that we're benefiting who we want to benefit, while still not having the system be so complex and onerous that we lose bidders. So, just kind of a philosophical point. This should be, I think, one of the guiding principles. And then recommendation number 4. I mean, I think you've kind of hit on 1, 2, and 3. 4 is to establish a working group across city departments. You mentioned a few of the things that working group would do, reviewing best practices. As Mr. Blumenfield indicated, it would be great to be able to compare to what other cities are doing in this area. And then, members, you see the others: identifying and evaluating small and local business programs, short and long-term changes that we might be able to implement to improve those programs, studying the feasibility of consolidating the small and local business programs and the LBPP, which makes tremendous sense to me. Consolidating other programs as appropriate. Determining uniform definitions for small businesses, because that is, for the reasons that I just touched upon, sometimes complex. Streamlining certification, providing recommendations to enhance training within the city, consistent communications, benchmarks and performance metrics, and so on, and a comprehensive outreach plan. And then item number 6 is an area that people are often asking about, and I think Mr. Englander has even raised this by way of motion, and that is redefining local businesses to not be geographically identified as being county businesses, but actually to be within the city. And I think it's been made clear to us over the years that the charter language itself prohibits us from doing that. And we've asked the city attorney to review it again. City attorney's office is nodding their heads back there that yes, they have reviewed it again, and that is the case. So to change that would require a charter amendment, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So one of the things, though, that I would like the city attorney to report back on as part of recommendation 6 is, I mean, I think the report on what steps would be necessary to change it is pretty clear. We'd have to amend the charter. So that's a 1-sentence report. But in addition to that, if you could please touch upon some other approaches that would be permissible under the Commerce Clause and equal protection decisions in this area. And one that comes to my mind in particular is, can we provide a preference that is not geographically based, but rather is based on the tax revenues that we generate from a particular business. So the lowest responsible bidder definition might take into account not just the price that they're going to charge the city, but also that price net of the tax revenues that the city is going to receive as well. So that is a way that, for example, if you're based in the city of Los Angeles and you get $1 million sale of goods contract with the city, there's going to be sales tax revenues that the city is going to realize because of that are not going to be realized if that business is in Burbank. Under our current local business preference program, the Burbank business and the South LA business are treated exactly the same, despite the fact that the city is going to receive almost, a significant benefit to its budget because of the sales tax revenues that will be realized for the LA business. Can we do that? Can we have a local business preference that is built on that kind of a model so that we allow that South LA business to be considered a lowest responsible bidder, even if it's perhaps a little bit higher than that Burbank business, because we're going to receive a net benefit? So I'd like to explore some of those ideas and think if there's some way that we can maybe not call it a preference for a city business and actually have it not be a preference for a city business per se, but rather base it on the actual finances of the contract.
Excellent idea.
Follow up on that?
Yes, Mr. Bloomfield.
Well, on the general topic about, LA City versus LA County, of the very few companies that took advantage of the LBE, given the data that we have, how many of them were city businesses versus county businesses, and do we know that?
We don't know that. So, but with these improvements in the program, administrative and technical, we could certainly work towards getting that data readily available, so it's clear and we know from the get-go.
Because I suspect, it's possible that none of them were
True.
LA City, so that the LBE program actually didn't give us any city, benefit for our city companies. So it's potential. I don't know the answer to that. And then, along with what Mr. Krikorian says, maybe there's a way to do a graduated thing where there is some benefit to having county folks versus, Oklahoma folks.
Right.
So maybe you have an LBE for under the current arrangement, but then you have, an extra 4 points that go based on if you can, it's going to be complicated, based on, potential tax revenue or something to that effect.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I think that the principal importance of the local business preference is met if the business is in the area, even if it's not in the city. The principal reason for having a local business preference is to employ people in Los Angeles and to create economic activity in Los Angeles. And whether that activity happens in Vernon or within the city boundaries, it's still the same local employees who are going to work every morning at those businesses. It's still the same revenues that are staying local that are being spent in the grocery store on the corner here. So it's not a significant difference. If we want to be honest about this, the economic impact is not significantly different whether it's across the border of the city or within the border of the city. The difference is to the city's budget. It's not to the economic activity benefit, it's to the budgetary benefit. And that's where this other issue comes in with regard to recapturing those tax revenues. Mr. West.
One thing that I just want to say is that let us not shy away from the conversation about a charter change. Regardless as to how we structure the actual program at the end of the day, it would benefit us if we had more latitude, more flexibility. So I do think that that's a very important conversation and one that we should engage in relatively soon so that we're not rushed and we have two different elections that we could place it on.
Well, it's a good point, and so in light of that, let me not give that point short shrift with the city attorney. We know we need a charter change, so how do we do that? What are the procedural steps? What are the deadlines? Maybe if you could just give us that roadmap with a mind to the nearest available election that we can do that, that would be useful for us.
And what are the 6 different options of charter change? Because there's a million ways you could slice that are out there.
Yeah, give us all of that. We can have a robust conversation.
So I think that sounds like it's a CLA, city attorney kind of joint effort and for the next report back on that. All right, anything else on this member? Mr. Englander?
Yeah, no, thanks, and I appreciate that. I mean, it's looking at the original language from the charter, it sounds like that's the easiest route in fixing some of those issues, and I'm glad you recognize it's something that certainly been talking about for years, and I think it is a simple fix that the voters would embrace. Having said that, one other thing I think we should look at, and it was said on number 7 on presenting options for streamlining certification methods and some of the real bureaucracy in some of the smaller companies and businesses having to get certified and go through. There's another element to that I've heard from small businesses as well. It's not so much the certification process itself or the paperwork and competing with the bigger players, or it's the fact that they have to do it every single time for every single bid. That's the issue.
Yep.
And so the issue isn't, and I'll give you an example, something that I worked incredibly close with my colleagues here on, and we all worked together to eliminate business taxes for car dealers. And we were successful in that, and we've seen a tremendous uptick in new revenue generated to the city in sales tax and car dealers coming back, and it's been a very successful program. Now, having said that, I've also had the opportunity to meet a lot of these folks and talk to them. When we were doing all that research, we found out most of those car dealers were not bidding on vehicle acquisition or purchases by the city. We would put out a bid. They weren't bidding. And I asked them why. And in fact, we started looking at the numbers, which I don't have in front of me, but it was shocking to see how few car dealers would submit, whether it was one car that the city was buying for the Bureau of Sanitation or LAPD, or they were actually going out there and doing a massive acquisition for 20, 30, 40 cars, or another department, LAWA, whoever might be purchasing vehicles. And the response was that they'd had to go through the entire bidding process and package and certifications every single time for every single bid for every single vehicle, not even knowing full well, and they can lose out by $1 and spend hours filling out all the paperwork. There should be an automatic either annual renewal or something to say you only have to do it once a year, or it's good for 2 years or a period of time, or you simply sign a document once you've been approved by the city as a bidder to say nothing's changed. I hereby certify under penalty of perjury that according to my last submission, and maybe that's good for 5 years, or some period of time that's reasonable, and to say it's one piece of paper. I hereby certify under penalty of perjury that nothing's changed. And rather than having to go through everything, and I think just talking about streamlining the process, I'd love to hear back and add another bullet point or an emphasis on that one that says it says presenting options for streamlining certification methods. It's not just the certification of small business, it's just all business or anybody doing business with the city, of streamlining that entire package. And that's what I've heard from a lot of businesses, is they just don't want to bid on city contracts. And then the fewer bids we get, the less competitive it is, the more I won't even open up so many other can of worms in conversation. I think it all speaks for itself. So if we can look at a way specifically for the entire bidding package for goods and services to be filled out only once, every certain amount of time, for a period of N, whatever that might be, and some kind of self-certification where anytime they bid, it's a cover sheet that they fill out saying they certify that nothing's changed, and that should last for a period of time. That's what I would suggest.
I have a feeling BCA would very much welcome such a change. It should be probably noted that a lot of those complications of the bidding package are things that, the council has layered on over the years, and some of that probably should be revisited. But I think until we can do that, at least at this point, if you've already done it once, there's really no need to do it 40 more times with, And then the other complication of that is that the one document that gets accidentally left out can disqualify a bidder.
I was going to bring that up. That one box that wasn't checked.
Yeah.
That one box that wasn't checked. And we've all heard so many stories and having to go back and saying, sorry, you lost out. You didn't get the 7 points, or what do we give now for local preference under that?
8%.
8 points? You didn't get the 8 points because that box wasn't checked.
Yeah.
Or whatever that might be. So again, they do it once, and it just, I would think, yeah, staff would support that. See.
Very good point.
Yeah.
All right. So then, members, the 6 recommendations that are included in the report, I would propose that we adopt. I would just modify number 6 so that that should be a report from the city attorney and the CLA on not only redefining local business as city exclusively, but also considering other options for redefinition of local businesses that will, along the lines that we've discussed here today. So if there's no objection, that will be the action of the committee. Thank you very much. And that brings us to item number 2.
Item number 2, the CLA to report in response to motion by Krikorian, Martinez, O'Farrell, Wesson, relative to an assessment on the percentage of the city's contracts that are held by small businesses and options to establish a goal for their participation in the RFP procurements and contracts. This item is also referred to the Economic Development Committee.
Okay.
So just very quick, our office will prepare a report for you on this subject matter. Some of the things that you've discussed already will be part of the report. For example, we discovered that there are difficulties in looking at the database to identify what a small business is. The data doesn't exist there. The other problem that we're running into is that we don't have a uniform definition of a small business. We've identified at least 4 definitions that the city uses already. And we know that the state uses different definitions, as so does the federal government. So we're going to have to do some work in that area. We've identified several other jurisdictions that have small business commissions, and so we'll be looking at that and providing some data for you on how those are structured and how that might inform the formation of a similar commission in the city. And the city is created many, many commissions, so we've got lots of ways that you can do it, and I think we would come back with a suggestion on a structure that might be simple to implement, that you could get going very quickly, and get them going to work. A group like that might be able to advise on how to define a small business, for example, and other issues like that.
Okay. Ms. Hovastapian, when is our next meeting scheduled? Okay. Agenda item number 1 on the March 30th agenda then will be the report back on this item, and we'll go ahead and hold this in committee until then. Yes.
So this is on
Mr. Englander.
item 2, correct? So for that, is there something we can look at as already been done in the context of the state enterprise zones as well?
We can look at that.
I mean, they're gone, they're
Yeah.
dissolved, but it was a good framework
Yeah.
and starting off point.
Okay.
Now, on that one, certainly when we get the report back to look at, the one thing that just was glaring was the 0.5% for women businesses. When, 50% of the population and 30% of all enterprises, that we were at 0.51% seemed crazy. So we could flesh that out in the report a little bit about how we ended up there, or if that's a definitional issue, or if that's really.
There might be some issues associated with that that'll be coming up in your next presentation. I think there's some constraints in state law that would apply in this area, but I think you'll be getting to that into the next presentation. So I would defer to Con Ed and City Attorney on that issue.
And again, not to beat a dead horse too much, but we also have completely unreliable data on this because a third of the departments have not bothered to respond to the request for this information. So I want to emphasize again, we cannot operate and make policy based on 2/3 of the information we need. So that'll be a continuing source of discussion between now and March 30th. Yeah,
Certain things that dead horse needs to be whooped on. This could be one.
all right, so we're going to hold this item number 2 in committee until the next meeting. Thank you, Mr. Wickham. And then that brings us to item number 3.
Item number 3 is a motion by Martinez and O'Farrell relative to an instruction to the Department of Public Works, Bureau of Contract Administration, to provide a status report on the city's business inclusion program and to transmit all business inclusion program quarterly reports to council. On January 27, 2015, the Economic Development Committee continued this item. This item is also referred to Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee.
Okay, so on this one, we're hearing from Con Ed as well as the mayor's office, I understand? Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Hannah Choi from the Bureau of Contract Administration. I have Linda McGlinchey, who's our city's expert on business inclusion programs. And to my right is Ron Lowe from the Mayor's Office of Economic Development, who's been overseeing the collection of the data that we all tried so hard to obtain. And he can go, why don't we start with his report on the collection of the data of the last 3 years, and then we can have further discussion.
Very good.
Over the last about year and a half, we collected the data from 13, 14, 15, 12, 13, 13, 14, and 14, 15. And we are now in the process of collecting the data from 15, 16. We were doing it manually with all the departments reporting to our department. We had one person kind of handling it all. We had several departments that claimed that the city attorney said that they were exempt from this reporting, and we disagreed, and we asked them for the reports continually. A few of them complied, some of them did not. So the report that you have before you is actual data compiled by us. We had a meeting, BCA had a meeting September of last year where we were looking to put this actually in the BOVIN so they can actually report into the BOVIN, which is what we're doing now. So we still don't have 100% compliance, but we're working on it. So I'm kind of keeping up after them to start put all the reports in the BOVIN on a quarterly basis so that they don't have to send it to us and put it in our spreadsheet so that we can all keep it together. So that's kind of where we're working on it right now.
That would be a welcome result when that's all done, and then we're at the point where we can actually look at it. It doesn't require a huge lift to get it. That would be a huge help.
I do have.
Yes, Mr. West.
You indicated that there were departments that said that they did not have to.
Yes.
What the hell is that based on?
Apparently.
I mean, it was a request, right, from...
Yes, from the mayor's office. Oh, yes.
Well, it carries more weight than us, sir.
They said that according to the city attorney's office, they were exempt from reporting. And these were, I think, the retirement funds, a couple of retirement funds were the real main culprits.
Should we make the official request?
I think we should.
Yeah, I wonder, do we need to, or what are your thoughts, Mr. Chair?
Are these among the same departments that we talked about before that failed to respond on the first two matters? Is this all the same
I would
universe?
I don't know, but I would.
I would guess so.
Why don't we at least speak privately with the city attorney, not in the context of a hearing, and find out what the legal issues are there and proceed accordingly after we do that.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Sure.
So,
Makes sense.
sorry, Ms. Choi, go ahead.
Sure. Before I go forward, I just thought maybe I would summarize for you the various programs that exist in the city.
Please.
Under the Business Inclusion Program, this is definitely a mayor's directive, ED 14, and it covers outreach to minority business, women business, small business, emerging business, and disabled veteran. I got all 5. So this is a program that came out of the mayor's office that replaced the old MBWVOB outreach program. So we are fine legally because it's an outreach program. We establish anticipated numbers that we believe contractors can meet, and all the effort is done through BOVIN. So there's no paper involved. Then we've So in addition to the BIP, we have the LBPP, the Local Business Preference Program, which the CLA's office just spoke to you about. It's the 8% preference, and there are certification guidelines involving that. The third program is the Small Local Business Preference Program. And that was enacted over 20 years ago for businesses, small businesses, $3 million or less within the county, and it's a 10% preference for contracts that are less than $100,000. And then, in addition to that, we have the federal programs, the disadvantaged business enterprise, and then the airport concession disadvantaged business enterprise. And then the proprietary departments have their own small business programs. So I just wanted to lay that out before you to just let you know that there are a number of programs that I think it's very critical for when the CLA has the working group. In addition to the mayor's office, Innovation and Technology, who came before you a couple weeks ago, talking about the overall look at contracting, we all need to kind of fold this all together and come up with a plan that is doable for not just city departments, for businesses as well. So all of it should be discussed in the working group is what I would like to recommend. So basically, for the business inclusion program, all departments are involved in administering the program and enforcing the program. Unlike the other ordinances and programs, BCA does not have jurisdiction over business inclusion program, but because our departments are so involved in contracting, we have sort of become the lead agency in many areas. And in addition to that, we actually certify the various categories involved with business inclusion programs. So that's why we work closely with the mayor's office in the implementation of the program. So there were some questions in the motion referring to the outreach efforts conducted. And so even though we don't have responsibility citywide for the business inclusion program, we've taken upon ourselves to contact the DCCs and provide training for the program. And we've also done various outreach events, small business academy, different programs, along with DWP and Port and LAWA to train businesses on how to do contracting. And we've also organized various Chamber of Commerce events and whatever we could do with the limited staff that we have to outreach and train businesses. And of course, the pre-proposal meeting, pre-bid meetings offer opportunities to let the contractors know about the program as well. And then there was a question about the benefits of BIP. The number one benefit, of course, is allowing contractors to find out about it's an outreach program. So all departments are required to post opportunities on Bovin, and the Bovin then is used to outreach for the primes to outreach to all the potential subs. So that as long as you're certified, there's no excuse for not finding out about a project. So that's an important tool. And of course, doing it through Bovin, we've completely gotten rid of all the paper-intensive outreach program. You don't hear people complaining about the volumes of paper that they have to submit to prove outreach because it's all done electronically. And then, of course, because it's an outreach program, again, we're safe from Proposition 209 that prevents race and gender programs. So as far as our bureau is concerned, our department, your continued support of Bovin and allowing many of the automation to take place through Bobbin would really, really help. I'm really grateful to Councilman Bloomfield. I don't know if you remember, but last year when we were sitting before the Budget Committee, you raised the question about how can we do this more effectively, and that prompted the funding, about $200,000, probably more than that, to ITA to add the many things that we wanted to, and your continued support of that, of ITA's funding and their staffing would really just make this an amazing system.
Anything else? Members, questions?
No questions. I just share your enthusiasm with the potential of incorporating all of our data in one place, in Bobbin, or something like that. And I think the more we use it, the more we encourage everybody to use it as a real instrument of transparency. It's going to help us all. So we got my support on this, absolutely.
Thank you.
And thank you for your comments, and certainly I'm going to continue to push that we get the technology that we need to do these kinds of things. A couple questions. When we started with the Business Improvement Inclusion Program, did we have certain benchmarks, and have we been meeting those, or how is it measured, or is it just?
So we did not have data to set benchmarks, so we created some anticipated numbers, 18% for minority, 4% for women, 25% for small, and 3% for disabled veterans. So we established those, and from looking at the partial data that we have, that the mayor's office collected, we are woefully inadequate as far as the meeting those initial percentages that we hope to achieve.
We don't have that. It's not quantified, but just qualitatively, that's where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
And then, in terms of when they do qualify as a certain one of those categories, are those categories updated over time, or are they just once you're in the system? How does that work?
Oh, you mean the certification of minority women?
Yeah.
It depends on the category, but for example, the minority women certifications, they're forever unless they're challenged. So what we've done is taken advantage of the state's certification. So we don't do our own; we accept the state's certification. That's one of the things that we really have to agree upon. The proprietary departments have much bigger contracts, so they hesitate using the state's smaller definition, and they would prefer using the federal, which is fine. So we really need to have even the three proprietary departments come together on a common definition, and then the council controlled can have our own. So these are things that we really need to talk about and come to some agreement.
Is the state definition easier or harder than the federal?
It's lower. It's 14 million for construction and 7 million. It's 14 million overall. But so yes, for small business. So for council control departments, we adopted the 14 million for construction, and then we believe that for the personal services type of contracts, it should be smaller. So we brought it down to 7 million. Yeah.
And that's our own thing. That's not just picking up the state.
Right. Yeah, we did a little study of the contracts in public works to see where they were, and we believe that those numbers were more realistic.
And then also, are there particular industries or enterprises where we see that we're more successful and less successful in terms of these programs, and what are they, and what is the reasoning for that concentration or lack?
Right. I believe the greatest success is in personal services contracts. It's not based on the contract bid. For example, for commodities and construction, we have no option but to take the lowest bid. So the decision is based mainly on the monetary value. But for personal services contracts, we have the option of reviewing the whole, their proposal. So whether it's a proposal that's reflective of the city's makeup, a proposal that has the necessary background, all these things. So we see more success in the personal services contract type of contracts than in the bid-based contracts.
I guess that maybe that's reflective of some of the issues, because probably the personal service contracts are much smaller than the commodities, right?
Yes.
What is it? It's like 10% or something?
Yeah, I think the biggest may be in construction or commodities. Not sure. Oh, okay. Okay, we can report on that. We can see the breakdown of the different contracts.
Yeah, certainly be curious, because that may help us also focus where we put our
That's
energy.
true,
and
yes.
get a better sense of where the issues are.
But to actually address your question as well, we can also look at, I work on another procurement committee for the LAUSD, and they're actually looking at best value versus best price. And sometimes that actually helps the small business, because the small business may actually have a better value than a better price. And some of those things I think we should actually take a look at.
It's a whole another kettle of fish here, but since you raised that issue, is there any opportunity for efficiencies through joint procurement with that we aren't already taking advantage? I know we do some of that with the county already, with LAUSD, with Metro, with any other agencies here that have very large procurement contracts for commodities that we all use. Are there any opportunities you think that we've not explored where we might realize efficiencies in procurement there? It's really not even this committee. That's more of a budget committee question, but since you raised the issue.
I think it's all worth exploring. I don't know that there would be any efficiencies gained, but I don't think it would hurt to at least, talk about it.
Okay. Sorry, that's a complete tangent. But anything else on this, members? Good. All right. So I know that this motion is being considered by Economic Development and also Public Works Committee. We'll go ahead and approve it, and also ask that, going back for a moment, if we can, to item number 1, that the working group that we've recommended be created under item 1 also encompass ways that we can improve the business inclusion program as well. So, so that'll be the action of the committee. And if there's no other issues, no other items before the committee, we've concluded. I thought that you had already addressed your public comment, but I'm happy to give you another minute as well. That if you hadn't, that's fine.
As I mentioned earlier, I hope we can get a separate category, BBE, Black Business Enterprise. I know you guys don't like to hear this term. They say politically it's incorrect, but I don't care anything about that. This means nothing if we don't get these illegals out of these contracts. We're back where we started. If I get $1 million contract, 90% of my staff are illegal, that money is going to other countries. The World Bank reported that $120 billion was sent to Mexico last year. They're sending billions back to their countries. That is not revenue for us. So it's like you go to the doctor and you have lung cancer, and the doctor's going to cut it out, but he never tells you to stop smoking. You see what I mean? We've got to address this. We've got to have a monitoring system that now they have this in Chicago when I was there. If a contractor has illegals working for him that he loses, he forfeits that contract. If we don't address this illegal issue, we're right back where we started. So we must have a clause in there that handles that. We've got to get these illegals out of our contracts and out of our state and our city. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned.